Right, so we're starting off this panel on entrepreneurship from the ground up, and with us we have entrepreneurs from Israel and the United States with a kind of common denominator that they've all come out of the Zell Entrepreneurship Program. In fact, they've not only all come from the Zell Entrepreneurship Program, they've come from the same year. And I think we're going to take this as kind of a look at the fact that Guy alluded to the idea of ecosystem and how important it is in the entrepreneurial environment. And I think if you look at the Zell program, that's a microcosm of that ecosystem. And if you look at Zell 2, the second Zell class, which Bernie had led, I think we have an even micro or nano cosm of that entrepreneurial ecosystem. So I guess I'll introduce one by one and then have them come and kind of tell their company's story, and then we'll ask some questions and be able to refer to some of the issues that pertain to the fact that entrepreneurs are starting from scratch in all kinds of different ways and also working together in all kinds of different ways. So we'll start with Eyal Gura. He's, like I said, a Zell 2 grad and a graduate of the business school at IDC. He also founded Israel's first entrepreneurship club on campus at IDC, and in the meantime, every campus in Israel now has an entrepreneurship club. So that's kind of an interesting legacy. He created Pick Scout with another Zell 2 grad just out of the program, and they built and developed that company until they spun it out to another company called Pick App, which he also led. Both companies were sold. And then if that's not enough, he helped his brother start his own startup. His brother also came to the Zell program in Zell 9, and that company was also sold. So a serial entrepreneur, now on to his next adventure called Zebra, which he'll be discussing. He also is a faculty in the Zell Entrepreneurship Program. He runs a course on a board of directors and has been a mentor in the program since forever. Yaron Carney, also a Zell 2 grad, and someone who I remember fondly for the fact that when I first took on the program on my own, this was the first guy that showed up in my office and said, "How can I help?" Yaron Carney has led an angel group. He founded and led an angel group of angel investors from abroad, which has now kind of developed and grown into a much bigger organization called Maverick, and they invest in less in seed and more in but still early stage to later stage companies. And what I think is very special about his angel group now is that it brings investors from all over the world, which I think is indicative to his success in his earlier investments, but also to the fact that there is, as Guy Rolnik alluded to, a stampede of investors coming to Israel. So that's that. And Yoni, who I had the pleasure to meet while abroad, because he has spent many years abroad out of the program, did an MBA at Columbia, and I got to meet him not only through the Zell network, but also because his sister was also in the Zell program. But after many years abroad working with high-tech companies and in all kinds of corporate settings, he's now joined forces with another Zell 2 grad, so you see there's a big theme here, in Form Labs, which he's going to tell us all about. So let's, I guess, start in that order. Eyal, do you want to start?
Thank you, Liat, for the introduction, and thank you, guys, for having us. It's a pleasure. First time for me up north here, Dartmouth. So I'll try to add some language to what Liat said about what we call the 1 degree of separation we have in Israel. Or maybe in Israel, I think it's one of the places where you have less than 1 degree of separation between people. So you all know that everyone in the world can connect with everyone else in the world with 5 or 6 different people in between. In Israel, we have just 1 phone call between people. So it can either be your relative, family member, people you served with in the army, people you learned together with in university, like my classmates here. So it's very tight, very close, and sometimes can be very intensive. But for the sake of the high-tech industry, it's very helpful. So when an Israeli go to Silicon Valley we can discuss it later. The network and the connection he will get from other Israelis who will try to help him are far more productive and intensive than if a TAC graduate will show up in Silicon Valley and ask who can help me from TAC. And same thing with Harvard or Wharton. So there is this sense of commonality and helping each other, which is very helpful for the entrepreneurs. So that's about that. In terms of my current venture or adventure, Zebra Medical Vision. So it's the fifth venture I'm starting, and it's going to be the hardest one by far to ramp up and very challenging one. So what Liat mentioned, we had this company out of the Zell program called PicScout. It was an image processing service. We enrolled and contained all the stock photo art pieces of the world. So all those Getty images, photos you see in newspapers and brochures, Corbis, Reuters, Associated Press. So all those companies enrolled their photos in our servers. Back then it was pre-cloud days, so we literally had to have hundreds of servers. And we hosted 100 million photos for the sake of monitoring them and see who is using them in various media channels, printed media or online. So in simple world, the operation was to crawl billions of photos every month from magazines and from the web and compare each one of those 4 billion photos to an original data sets of 100 million photos, pixel by pixels, and see the similarities and report to the content owners who is using their images. Guess what we'll discover? What was the percentage of people who actually license properly the images online? Any guesses?
0.
So 10% of the content we discovered was properly licensed, and the other 90%, including in corporate America, corporate Europe, all those Western developed countries. So 90% was infringements of the photographer's copyrights. And we initially thought, okay, after a year, when everyone will be caught up, they will stop. Apparently not. So every year it's between 85 and 90%. And it's keep going. The internet is growing. People are bouncing content from one to another, and the phenomena is still there. The company ended up being acquired by Getty Images, but the interesting story in how we started this new company, Zebra, is that when I was the CEO of PicScout, I was hospitalized in Mexico after some scuba diving incident. And there wasn't any physician around in this clinic where they hospitalized me near Playa del Carmen. And there was an X-ray device and a technician, so we took 10 or 11 X-ray shots at me, trying to assess what I have. Obviously, couldn't assess because he wasn't qualified to do any diagnosis, so he was just staring with the file in front of the light, trying to figure out what I have. We had to wait 2 or 3 days for the physician to come from the big city to diagnose me. And beside the clinical frustration, there was this intellectual frustration of how come I own this company that compares billions and billions of photos and pixels on a monthly basis, and I cannot send my own X-ray to be diagnosed by a machine or partially diagnosed, or at least to provide me some reference cases that look very similar that were diagnosed. So that's seeded the idea for this current company called Zebra Medical Vision. And as soon as we sold all those 3 other companies at 2011, I started to work on this idea. And the critical path, if some of you dealt with healthcare, the critical path is to create this reference database. And so it took almost 3 years, but early this year we got access to the largest data set that was ever released for research in this field by one of the largest HMO groups in Israel. In size, they are very similar to Kaiser in the US. So it's a very sizable group, and we are now, it's clearly. So we're now in the process of digesting hundreds of terabytes of data of medical imaging files, real clinical files, including the diagnosis and whatever the physician thought that happened there. And basically we will try to teach computer to make those diagnoses by themselves in a more accurate way. And the vision is to help the next 1 billion people that are joining middle class this decade to get proper diagnosis. Up here or in specifically in Boston, you have a very good hospitals network and HMOs, and in some other parts of the state, not in all parts, but in some parts, the healthcare system is pretty reasonable. But if you are in one of those places of the world where there is a very fast-growing middle-class population, and you might see a hospital with a new CT device or a new MRI device that is still covered with plastic because no one can activate it and no one can diagnose the output of those devices. So this is what we are up to. We're trying to create the bionic radiologist based on the very new cutting-edge technologies that you might heard of deep learning and algorithms for computer vision. So this is in broad sense what we're trying to do. My co-founder is Eyal Toledano. I think he will join us on Skype later on as part of another panel out of Israel. He and another friend were the actual geniuses in our class. They co-founded the first Samsung R&D center outside of Korea in Israel, and graduated the MIT Media Lab, and recently relocated back to Israel to help me start this crazy adventure. So this is about Zebra.
Okay. Oh, actually, I can sit down and speak to you. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my personal journey, because I think I represent I guess the aspect of Israeli entrepreneurs or startup managers who then live abroad and facilitate this broader network that helps both other Israelis abroad and also companies in Israel. And I'll also tell you about Formlabs, which is the company I work for now, where I lead finance. So I joined Formlabs in April this year. Formlabs was founded by another classmate of ours from the Zell program, Natan Linder, and one of his cohorts at the MIT Media Lab. They were both PhD students and researchers, and they were frustrated with the problem that they couldn't find a 3D printer which was both cost-effective and easy to use and produced results that were good enough for professionals in the lab. So the problem was that you could get 3D printers for as low as $1,000 that produced very rudimentary models that were good as toys for hobbyists. And then you had industrial grade machines for 50 and 100,000 and more, which produced good results, but the model of engagement around them, because of the cost and the complexity, necessitated organizations really configuring a very complex supply chain inside the organization for engineers, designers, people that needed to interact with this technology. I think the best parallel is in the 70s and early 80s when computers were reduced from machines the size of rooms or half a room, and were very complex, and you needed to have a specialized operator for them. And they were reduced to something that sits on your desktop and gives you more power than the machines that we had before, and with relative ease of use. So these two founders started Formlabs to do exactly that. And Formlabs was the first company to bring professional grade desktop 3D printing to the market. So in 2011, in September 2011, the company was founded, raised some seed money, which took them about a year to get to prototypes, which were then shown on Kickstarter. The company raised $3 million on Kickstarter, which to this day is one of the highest grossing projects that went through the crowdfunding venue, not only Kickstarter, but as a funding mechanism overall. From that point, it took about 7 months to start shipping product. So in May of 2013, Formlabs shipped its first 3D printer, and by October, the company had raised $19 million in Series A, and by December of that year, we had shipped 1,000 printers into the market. So fast forward a few more months, and as of June this year, we released our second generation of the printer, the Form 1 Plus. At that point, we already had thousands of machines in the field working for about a year and a half, and that allowed us to really understand the feedback from the market and develop the product further to the point where today we have a good lead in the high-resolution desktop stereolithography market. That's the technology that we employ. And the company is heavily investing in, continues to heavily invest in R&D, and also in abilities to develop the market, sales and marketing, and the organization. So in about 3 years, we're now crossing the 95 people mark. We're growing rapidly. We were about 50 people when I joined in April, and we continue to grow as fast as we can on the hiring front. We're seeing very strong growth and acceptance from the market. And we work hard at scaling up our manufacturing, but we continue to be surprised with sales and market acceptance of our product. So that continues to really be the challenge for us.
I'll go there. Well, again, as Eyal said, thank you everyone for inviting us. We're very excited to be here. Specifically, thank you, Liat, for the introductions, and Bernie and Dan. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about my story. So after the Zell program, I relocated to New York. I had grown up in New Jersey, but no one says New Jersey, so I say I grew up in New York. And then I relocated there and worked there for a year with my brother. And then I'd met my wife, who's sitting here in the crowd. And I moved. I met her at a New Year's party in New York City, and I moved back to Israel. And I was wondering what I was going to do. In New York, I had helped my brother set a sizable marketing firm, which was sold. And then we moved back to Israel, and I was trying to figure out what to do. And of course, everyone in Israel who wants to sort of be in the breakthrough of the business world tries to go into the high-tech scene. And I literally just had a lot of luck, and I connected to someone who I met through the Zell program, Mark Gerson, who founded the Gerson-Lerman Group. And this was just about the same weekend that he had sold a sizable chunk of his business to Silver Lake. He'd called me and said, let's do something in Israel. So he was basically a pioneer, in my opinion, of angel investing in Israeli companies. And we were looking. I saw maybe 100 companies and didn't find anything that we found appropriate. And then again, this is very random, but the first company we ended up invested in, called Lab Pixies, is a company that was founded by 4 individuals. One of them was also in our class of the Zell program. So as you see, this is quite random, but it can't be that much luck. There must have been something in the water we drank. And that company was a company that did widgets. It was sold 5 years ago to Google. It was the first Israeli company sold to Google. And it was a very big deal at the time. And what it created was widgets. Widgets are sort of like apps that you have on your phones now. But back then, there were widgets, which are these boxes of information or games or whatever that would be on your iGoogle, which is something that doesn't exist today, by the way. And so that was my story. And then I brought the deal, and I was the head of business development and the director there. But 95% of everything that was done, obviously 99% was done by the founders, the tech founders. They were a great group of people. One of them is starting three of them started another company, and one of them is now I'm in talks with. He's starting a different company of his own. So entrepreneurs tend to rinse and repeat, do this often, as you've seen yourselves. And then I founded the Tel Aviv Angel Group. So the Tel Aviv Angel Group was composed of 5 individuals, mainly from the United States and one from England. And we invested in Israeli companies, different types of different fields, very, very early stage companies. We'd invested in 6 companies and sold 5 of them. So that was very, very lucky. One of our approaches were to also sell to other funds, to American funds and other foreign funds, to sell our stakes relatively early. And then about a year ago, I founded Maverick. Maverick Ventures is a fund, which is sort of like a mega angel group, in my opinion. It's composed only of private individuals from around the world, again, that are helpful in the success of the Israeli companies that we invest in. So everyone is relatively active. We have people from all walks of business life. We have people from almost all continents, or most continents, ranging from Australia to Europe to Brazil. My main partner is from Brazil, and he actually now co-founded another fund with the former chief banker of Brazil and the former head of Accenture in South America, geared to late-stage companies. So bringing Israeli late-stage companies into Brazil. It's a $75 million fund. With a twist of helping these Israeli companies get into Brazil, which is sort of an relatively untapped market. So it's very interesting. We are 4 people at Maverick, Maverick Ventures. All of them are from abroad, which again, it's very interesting to see that you see people that move to Israel or live in Israel and work. And our head of technology was director of engineering at Apple. PhD from Berkeley. He was at Xerox Park in the golden era days. He's an older gentleman. He still codes. It's very interesting to see. Our head of Dr. Eric Sirkin, our head of technology and operations, Joe Rabi. He moved to Israel from New York. He was an accountant at Ernst & Young, and then he set up, he was a VP at Morgan, and then he set up Sunshine Suites, which was basically the first very large shared office space business in New York. It catered to over 700 companies. So he's very attuned to operations and startups. And myself, I come from a very proud graduate of the Zell program. I also have a master's in law. And that's it. It's very interesting to see that a lot of what was mentioned earlier is that people no longer perceive Israel as a place, as a young country where as a philanthropic country. Actually, this is exactly our point. A large percentage of our investors are not affiliated with Israel or Jewish, or they do this for what I call the right reasons. They invest in Israel because they want to make money, and that's totally legitimate, and that's a really great thing to see. A few of our investors are professors from down south, from Harvard and MIT and other places, and where we hope that we're founding the next significant fund in Israel. So far, we've made 3.5 investments in different fields. And so in the angel group, again, what we had before, we had really a variety of fields ranging from agriculture to big data. Now, the companies we invested in, as Liat said, are a bit more advanced. So we invest in companies that already have some kind of traction, and we invest more sizable in investment amounts ranging from $1 to $3 million. Last deal we did was $3 million. We decided to be under the radar this time, relatively. We don't really promote ourselves as much as in the past. We have a sizable deal flow. We see roughly 500 to 600 companies a year that we get. And we invest in less than 0.5% of that, but that's just, thank God in Israel you have a lot of deal flow. The Jewish mother no longer wants her son to be a doctor. She wants him or her to be an entrepreneur. And as a result of that, we have significant deal flow. We have great ideas that we see in Israel. It's very, very interesting. And there are some things that need strengthening, just as was mentioned earlier. But that's fine. These are all things that we could adjust, management and growth and things of that sort. Also, business-wise, valuations make much more sense in Israel than they do in other places in the world, and that's also an opportunity for us. But just to recap everything, again, it's an exciting place to see. It's an exciting market to look at. In Israel, there are about 140 R&D people per 10,000 people, while, say, in the States, it's about, say, 85. And again, the Russian immigration from the former Soviet Union is a big factor to that. And that's it. So.
I guess I'm not on, but you can hear me. Steve, before we take it to you, just a few small questions to the panel that I think that you didn't address that I'd like to mention. But Eyal, I'll start with you. You did mention that, or you gave credit to the Samsung group that, the Zell graduates, that their company ended up being the foundation of Samsung's R&D. And in fact, two of the companies that you either founded and managed or helped your brother to found also became R&D centers in Israel. So 3 of the Zell graduate companies, and we're hoping for more. What do you think how do you think that fits into a broader trend of what's going on in the ecosystem today? Because there are literally hundreds of global R&D in Israel, and I think what the interesting point to it is it's not only these days the high-tech companies that you would imagine, like Google and Apple, but also even Coca-Cola, who they haven't set up an R&D center, but they do have an accelerator program in order to try to tap into Israeli technology. So where do you see this trend going? And
okay, that's a good question. So Guy Rolnik earlier mentioned that we are a people or a state without border and limitations, and we are people without limitations. So for startup, it's great. You have people that want to cross boundaries and to walk in the desert and find the oasis. It's great for startup, but in the last few years, I've also been a venture capitalist, and in the venture community, especially for big funds who want to get big returns and deploy a large amount of capital, it's important to take Israel to the next level. So we want to call it scale-up nation, not startup nation. And in order to scale up, the Israeli entrepreneur and the team really need to have some borders and some methodologies about how to scale an organization, both marketing-wise, management-wise, and the existence of all those hundreds of big corporates in Israel, the Googles, the Yahoos, the Ciscos, the Samsungs, is actually a great, sort of speak, MBA for the Israeli entrepreneurs and their core teams. So when they are being acquired by a Getty Images or a Google or an eBay, you remember when eBay acquired the Gifts project, the first thing they came to the office, they put a big sign, our corporate values, our corporate methodologies, everything was in set. They had a very efficient M&A department. All the employees went into the funnel of HR process. Everything was very well organized, and it was a very surprising for the team. But a year or 2 years later, the team is already starting to think in those terms, in terms of how to hire their employees and how to manage their teams, and how to sell to foreign customers. So overall, I think that this notion of hundreds of startups becoming those hundreds of R&D centers of a big corporation and having tens of thousands of Israelis getting this crash course of how to scale, I think is a good thing, because the next step is that all those teams are leaving the corporates. No one wants to work for a big corporate in Israel for a long period of time, and then they go and found their next startup, which is great for us.
Good. And Yoni, a question to the notion of, so you've been abroad basically many years since I've known you, so probably a little over that, maybe 10 years or
something like that, yes.
And in Israel, there's sometimes concern, and it kind of made me think a little bit to Guy's point about terror, 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 terror. So one of the things like that you hear in the Israeli news all the time is brain drain, brain drain, brain drain. And you know how awful it is that great people like Yoni are leaving the country. So my personal version of that is that, first of all, I think people should live where, where they're happy and where things are good for them. And my sense from all the help I've gotten from you personally, but also that's as a microcosm, but just the sense that having Israelis abroad is also incredibly helpful to the Israeli entrepreneurs that are coming out there. Can you give some examples of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I came here a little more than 9 years ago as a sales leader for 2 startups. And even back then, the amount of help that you would get from just any Israeli that you could identify at a prospect company that you wanted to set meetings with. People basically opened up their Rolodexes, extended their hands in friendship. And people that I had no connection with other than just being Israelis. And I was new here, and they were helping the new guy on the block out. That was, I think, very meaningful for myself personally, and also for the companies that I worked for. Then again, I met that personally again when I was deciding on which business school to attend, the same exact mechanics. I reached out to Israelis that were publicly affiliated with a school, either alumni or current students. And that was a bridge, and I was able to get the information, the culture of the schools, learn a lot of the insider details from these people, and at the same time, I think that even post MBA, the types of roles that I had, I directly after my MBA, I went to work for an Israeli multinational company, Nest Technologies, and I did financial and operational roles in one of their divisions here. The Israeli connection was very much something that helped me, secure that position, because I could be, again, that bridge. Like people were for me, helping me out in bridging the Israeli business to the U.S. business, and culturally and in many other ways. I provided that to some extent to the Israeli company that employed me, and then at the same time, I helped numerous other people that reached out to me through the Zell network, through just people that knew people that I didn't even know them, but just having that help along the way really created a sense of duty and obligation towards other fellow Israelis that needed my help, and I've always tried to extend that hand in friendship wherever I've been along the way.
Good, okay, thanks. And Yaron, so, ever the connector, and you did allude to the fact that investors now are coming to Israel not because of their Jewish connections or affiliations, but because they're looking for investment opportunities. And you're, in a sense, taking that in your fund to the next level by trying to take that scale on and tap into, beyond the Israeli network, try to find people who are interested in Israeli technology and take that out there. So Brazil is one example of that. Can you share a little bit about what that would mean in Brazil? Like, what is this an outlet for Israeli companies to grow in particular there?
Specifically Brazil, I've been to Brazil a few times in the past year. I was never there before. Brazil, relatively speaking, compared to, say, the United States, lacks innovation. I mean, you know, that's a pretty big generalization, but as opposed to, say, the American culture of that people do innovate and there are lots of entrepreneurs, there it doesn't exist as much. There are a few. I visited some incubators and there are some VCs there, but the scene, the entrepreneurial scene there is not strong, and they yearn for innovation more than you could imagine. One of the companies we'd invested in through the Angel Group developed a technology. It was founded by two former pilots in the Israeli Air Force that developed a technology that assesses the air pressure of tires. Now, it's a very big deal. It's important for people who have, say, supply chain companies, for instance. So one of the big investors that came on board after us, was a Brazilian company that used this technology not to only assess the tire pressure, but to actually check to see, regarding theft of large tires. Supposedly, apparently, a lot of people steal and switch tires. The drivers there, and it's something that you would never think of, but they were yearning for this innovation. Brazil is a great place to look at. It's a very strong economy, relatively speaking. It's segregated quite well, but it's a strong economy. Another country that we have investors from is Panama and Australia. All these places are, the people that are invested with us are also looking for the innovations themselves to see if they could be helpful in their own companies that they know. Again, in our fund specifically, the investors are quite active in helping the companies, and they themselves have a very sincere interest in the type of stuff that we get to see.
So Israelis are known for looking straight to the United States as their first go-to-market. And so what I'm kind of hearing from you is that you're trying to shift that and make use of your investors in order to help Israelis span out beyond the United States market.
Right. It shouldn't only be to the United. We want to be the United Nations of investors, people from all over the world. Of course, about 60% of our fund are from people from North America, Canada, and the United States. But the world is big and large, and these technologies could be utilized anywhere.
Thank you. Steve, would you like to take it from here?
Certainly. Thank you all for, I think, getting us to think a little bit more about what it's like to be an entrepreneur in Israel. And there's three themes that I want to try to pull together from what I heard this morning. One is scale. So we've heard that word a couple times. The other is network. It's both expressed in terms of ecosystem and personal networks. And the third is culture. So kind of my anecdote way into this is from Guy's presentation. In a previous life, I was a sell-side analyst at Goldman Sachs following the software sector during the internet boom. So I was about as optimistic as you can get. In fact, people described us as irrational, right? Irrational exuberance, right? So we were on one end of the spectrum. But during that experience, we got to meet with thousands of companies, startup companies, who wanted to go public. And a small subset of those companies were Israeli-based companies, and they really struck out. They stuck out to me at the time in terms of their professionalism, and I think their kind of overall knowledge of the business and their ability to run a business. And it was just kind of an anecdote in my mind during the time. It's like, these people are a little bit different than the high school student who's been running a company for 3 months and thinks that they should go public. It wasn't until I actually studied the topic a little bit more that I really kind of understand what the difference is, and it relates to what Yal was saying, is that's around scale. We were talking with mostly the U.S. offices of Israeli startup companies. But so Israeli startup companies need to kind of get global faster than, say, a U.S. company, which brings scale types of issues very early on into the organizational life of these startups. You need to be able to run a multinational company very, very early on. And in some cases, it goes the other way, where it starts in the U.S. and goes back to Israel. Why is that important? Well, I think that one of the things that's going on in entrepreneurship in general is that the access to capital to actually start your business is getting cheaper and it's easier to do. So originally, one of the big hurdles is getting you to come and invest in my company, but that hurdle's getting is not quite as high as it has been historically. You could go to Kickstarter and get money that way. So the real issue is once you have the money, how are you able to scale your organization? And that's really becoming what people call the first crisis of leadership in organizations. Is once we've got something started, how can we build it to a more sustainable type of business? And I actually, through my own experiences and hearing you all talk, I think that this is actually a form of competitive advantage, perhaps, for Israeli-based entrepreneurs, is that they're faced with the issue of scaling a lot earlier than I think U.S.-based companies, which is my comparison. So the first point is thinking about scale of the organization and the issues that creates and your abilities to manage that, which relates to the second point, which is about networks. So we heard a lot about the 1 degree of separation in the network and the strength of kind of the strength of ties between people, and how that can really, the benefits of that, and how it can really help you get introductions into new businesses, potential customers, helps develop in your education, all sorts of great benefits of having a strong network. And if you think about that in an organizational sense, too, that's very helpful as well. You speak the same kind of language, you kind of think the same way, so you're able to make decisions more quickly, and you don't have to do a lot of explanation, which is very, 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 very positive. So we heard all the positives of having a strong network, which Dartmouth itself and Tuck is very proud to boast as well. Our alumni giving at Tuck is 70%. I think it's a little bit better than the institutions. It's a thing that we are very, very proud of. But so it's something that we fully appreciate. But you also have to think about the issues with that, or the challenges of having a very strong network. So strong networks often mean that you have that it's very cohesive, and you are talking to similar type of people. Now, in the world of startups, having a diversity of opinion is extremely important to get the other point of view, to challenge your assumptions, so that you can work through kind of the trials and errors that occur through a startup life. So one of the questions I have is, how do you introduce diversity in such a strong network so that you can get these different opinions to help develop new ideas and help the organizations grow, which is related to the last point, and that's culture, which I think started with Guy's talk as well. We put up that slide that Israelis do not obey rules, right? And there's this belief, this general belief about innovation is rule breaking and things like that, which is all very, very positive. You need to do that. You need not to be inert and set in your ways, and so rule breaking and things like that are extremely important. Yes, that gets you going, but then we hear, going back to scale and building a sustainable organization, rules are very important. Right? Putting in bureaucratic rules, establishing, you said, was it Google came in and put it, or is it, I forget, Getty put in their core values, right? So having some bureaucracy, having some authority, and having some rules is extremely important in sustaining sustaining the business once you get going. So I'm always fascinated in this discussion of culture and entrepreneurship, because there's this idea that you need an innovative culture. I'm not sure exactly what that is, but it's defined on this basis of being not wedded to old ideas and breaking types of rules. But on the flip side, you do need some rules, and you need to bring in some form of structure. So the question posed there is how do you embrace that aspect of culture and kind of the innovative culture that you're trying to build within the community?
It is my opinion that there's a clash between those two things, and you won't see in many large companies real innovation, and people like to conform to the groupthink that you find in these large companies. There are some innovative companies such as Google, which I'm a fan of, obviously, and others. But generally speaking, there's a clash there, and you tend to see that real innovation comes out of teams of 2 to 4 people that are sitting in a garage somewhere, and as a result, there's a clash. That's why you get to see so many startup companies being founded, and a few of them being sold. And usually you see that they don't buy, by the way, just the product. It's usually an acqui-hire, right? They want to hire the people as well,
right,
which is very important because they want to bring these types of people into their organizations.
If I could just add a little comment, I tend to disagree with that. I think that, yes, there could be a clash to it, but in the 10 years that I've been following entrepreneurs, I think that you need a kind modicum of this and that. If you're totally going to, innovation doesn't come out of chaos necessarily. It comes out of a place that there is some structure and there is some leeway. So I think that kind of improbable imbalance is probably a better bet. I haven't seen very many successful entrepreneurs that are just all about innovation and aren't able to also be professional and explain their message in a very understandable way to the kind of audience that they need to, which is invariably an American audience or a European audience that isn't going to be, just taking in all the craziness. So I think it's a balance. I think just kind of going back to the Zell program that I inherited, I think Bernie did a great job in trying to balance this Israeli energy and creativity with a lot of American curriculum structure. And I think that's one of the inherited things that I took to the program. And really I tried to balance in the program, we'll talk about it, whether entrepreneurship can be taught in a kind of a discipline that somehow also leaves room for that innovative spark and that kind of edginess and craziness. But I think it's not a clash that can live so disparately.
I agree with that. I think that for companies to really grow and scale up through the phases that Eyal, and to the size that Eyal was talking about before, in the scale-up nation vision, I think we're looking not for an innovative culture, but for a culture of innovation in companies. The difference being, structure, processes, ways of doing things, and a cohesive culture or cohesive identity for the culture, for people in the company. All those things are conducive of people working together towards a common goal and in ways that are repeatable, that allow you to improve the level of service that you provide to your customers, to learn and retain the knowledge inside the company and build on that, so that you're continuously improving and learning how to what things you need to be doing differently to expand from the current phase that you're at to the next phase. And growing, Formlabs is going through very strong growth, as I said before, on the HR front. One of the things that we struggle with, and we find it imperative, is retaining our culture. We think that our culture is really a vehicle. It's one of our best competitive advantages. It allows us to attract a very diverse set of people which they all have a consistent strain of excellence and high level of professionalism from wherever setting they come from. I think the twist to how to implement corporate policies, corporate culture at the startup level to be conducive to innovation is really to give people more freedom, but guided freedom. So, in a way, if somebody doesn't come to work at 9 a.m. like everybody else, but they come to work at noon, and they work throughout to the wee hours of the night, and that works within their team. Their teams can function. That's not something that the company needs to intervene. Another example would be, if people contribute to the work environment and make it a fun place to work, but they send a very weird email on the weekend, which at some of the bigger companies I worked for would not be very welcome. This is something that we understand, and we celebrate the quirkiness and the weirdness of employees as a community. And it's something that isn't a big deal. What is a big deal is really you need to work towards the common goal. And in some senses, I think in a lot of startup companies, you develop a cult with all its quirkiness, but it's some cohesion that takes a diverse set of constituencies with all different types of talents that you need to scale up from a very small organization to a larger organization that can really address the broader needs of the market that you're trying to address.
Yeah, so it's a very interesting conversation about the cultural aspect, and anyone who's spent time in Israel has usually come away amazed at how conflictual the society is at every level, whether it's religion, politics, you name it. And I'm curious if anyone has compared the entrepreneurship culture in Israel versus other countries in terms of whether or not there are more people essentially bugging out of new ventures, if there are more dissolutions, if there's more, you've all mentioned, I worked with this guy, I worked with that guy, this person, that person, and I'm just wondering if there's just a lot more churn in that regard than there might be in Sweden, for example, which was mentioned before. I'm curious, Steve, if you studied that, and whether that isn't a challenge also for Israeli entrepreneurship.
Can I say while you're addressing that, would you add Germany to the equation, which is also known for sort of small, medium companies?
I'll try to take on this question. So comparing to Silicon Valley, we are in a better position in regards to this churn that you mentioned. In Silicon Valley these days, the employees really try to maximize the equation of their time and their options value. So the moment their options are vested, they are off to the next employee, and it's better be a well-funded employee by known funds that will take care of them in case something goes wrong, and they can network themselves into their next employer. So in Israel, employees tend to be more loyal to the founding team and vision, and try to see how it's being executed. So they will stay more years, but it's still a challenge because new very exciting startups are being ramped up every day, and if you are even slightly bored in your current position and you get a call from your ex-army team member or commander that he started a new startup, you will join him probably.
Yeah, so I don't study entrepreneurship across countries. In fact, I was trying to think of a study that I could point you to that would be helpful. It's not as studied as it should be. I think you'll hear from Liat later on. We have issues of just trying to understand entrepreneurship at a basic level. you know. But I can point you to a great book that's not, it's comparing two different cities that kind of gets you a sense of how culture, either at a national level or even kind of a business culture within a city, can influence. And I think you're hearing some of that in the discussion today. And there's a book by Annalise Aksanian called Regional Advantage, which compares Route 128 in Boston to Silicon Valley during the emergence of kind of the tech booms there, and was trying to understand why is Silicon Valley so much more successful than Route 128. And there's lots of reasons, but one of them is cultural, and kind of how the culture of doing business it developed within each of those cities. So Boston was dominated by tech at the time, and there's a very hierarchical type of relationship where you speak up to a larger organization, and authority structures are extremely important. Where Silicon Valley was much more around a collaborative type of approach. From what we've heard today, Guy described the kind of corporate climate in Israel broadly. It doesn't sound like Israel is very much like Boston was, with dominant, larger players, but yet there's a strong regulatory presence from that I don't think can be ignored. But what that does is that ingrains kind of attitudes and beliefs and how you go about conduct yourself in a business environment that's a lot different in Silicon Valley. And you hear that, like, okay, the person doesn't show up at 9 a.m., they show up at noon. We embrace that quirkiness, and we embrace the weird email and all that, which I completely agree makes a lot of sense, particularly on earlier stages. But when you're reaching that point of scale where you want efficiency and not necessarily just new ideas showing up at noon, is not a good thing. And the challenge, I think, is if this is ingrained at a national level about rule following and things like that, that's a big challenge, because those cultural beliefs are held much deeper than anything you would experience within an organization. And if you compound that with the fact that we have very strong, tight networks, which we've also seen the benefits, but that also creates cohesion and makes it hard to change. So these are like second order issues, but you're looking at these different characteristics that I think create some interesting challenges. We've seen a lot of benefit, but there's also challenges.
You know, it's like saying, you know, we're talking about this here in this comfortable area here, like in a lab, but you know, it's like saying, you know, these are my principles, and if you don't like them, I have others. So right. with entrepreneurs, it's sad to say, but they control you, and I mean, especially the technologists. So my wife, for instance, is the director of HR of probably Israel's fastest growing company. It already has over 800 employees in 2 years.
So you know these issues.
Yeah.
She knows it well.
It's fascinating to hear that, you know, we're talking about economics and startups and everything, but in the end of the day, we all talk about the human capital and how we find these very sophisticated people and how we retain them. And how do we maintain the culture of a small startup and then we're growing. It's, in the end of the day, that is essence.
I think one of the more important things in order to preserve this culture is the acceptance of failure. And which is something that you asked previously about other nations. So I gave similar lecture in Singapore a few years ago, and they were all obsessed about how can we imitate the formula of startup nation in Singapore. And they were very disappointed to hear from me. As an Israeli, I don't need to be politically correct, so I told them that you can't. And when they were obsessed of why, I told them on paper you have everything that is needed. It's similar or even better GDP, a very productive environment, remote from the market. You even do an army period. But the acceptance of failure or the ability to do trials and errors is something that is less popular in Asian societies. It's rapidly becoming better these days because the world is flatter and people are connected. But in Israel, as part of the culture that we inherit from the army and also into the startups, the acceptance of failure and doing improvising and trials and errors is much better. And this is something that even if you grow to a bigger corporate, as long as the management keeps this as part of the DNA, that it's okay to fail as long as you learn from it and move on, it's, you can survive in this ever-changing world. Companies that will be strictly into order and structure, it's basically, they will basically waive innovation and they will not survive. The only thing that is constant these days in the world is the change. So it's,
but I would stress just one last comment is that, you know, you shouldn't, for those who haven't been to Israel, you shouldn't perceive Israel as a chaotic place. At the end of the day, people there at the age of 18 find themselves in situations in the army, and they learn to be both responsible and accountable, you know, more than anyone else their age anywhere else in the world. So at the end of the day, you know, they, as we say, tachlis, have dealt with it. So there are a few quirky people, as Yoni mentioned, and usually those are the smartest people in the organization and the most innovative ones. But as a society, we know how to, you know, at the end of the day, when push comes to shove, to be responsible and accountable.
I think Glenn has wanted to make a point.
Well, I had a question and a point. The question was just from the research perspective of what perhaps at Tuck or other places have studied this whole process of innovation. How does that distinguish from improvisation? It seems like these are two very different things. Israel's very good at improvising and at innovating sometimes, but not always. It seems like they're very different. Improvisation, tourism, is really a key thing that you're taught and that people do. I guess the point I wanted to make was that I was just thinking you guys are a lot younger than a bunch of other of us that are here in the room, but that was not a principle in the Army, you know, prior to a very traumatic experience in 1973 of a heuristic principle that was adopted of Ibra Istabra, on the other hand, what is the challenging point? Of groupthink was the term was widely used, and after 73 in the Intelligence Control Division, of where many of the people come out of 8200 and other places, was to really always have something where someone would violently agree and sometimes violently disagree, and to internalize that into the process of decision making. But that was not a core doctrine prior to that period. Groupthink just about lost the country.
Well, I think there were probably other dynamics as well. I mean, that's obviously a very good point, but the influx of immigration from different countries also. So I think to the point of also the tight network, it's a tight network of very diverse people with a kind of overriding goal and an overriding threat that threatens. So we're maybe a chaotic people of kind of all different types. And I think relating to Germany, which I don't have any research experience in, but I have taught at a university there for several years. I think if I look at Guy's points of you know, borders and limits and obeying rules and certainly legacy and commitments, I think you know, the German stereotypes are pretty much clear. But I think the really interesting point about having options, employment options, waiting for them. So the group that I teach are computer science students that are in their final year of their master's program, so a 5-year, you know, they're undergraduate through graduate school. They're about 23, 24 years old. And the employment options that are waiting for IT and computer science students in Germany are, you know, they have signing bonuses that are offered to them in their final year. So their impetus to go and start a startup, you have to literally be a nut to do that. There's just, not that you guys aren't nuts, you guys are also nuts, but I think that's a really, really big, you know, a really big pull to the idea. So it's not based on research, but certainly the German situation as opposed to the Israeli situation is very different in the opportunities that the people have going out of university. Yes, Bernie?
I just wanted to come back to Eyal's point about failure, because I actually think that there's a kind of underlying enabler of that, which connects some dots to the strong networks and the Army in some cases the army camaraderie that's formed and so on. When Yoni says that a company has to continue to allow for failure, allow for this, my sense is that the social networks of North Tel Aviv, Herzliya, somehow have become so strong and so affectionate, and can be so strong and so affectionate, that you don't really pay a social price for failure, which is the thing that you don't have in China. I mean, when Motorola University went to China and started its first management training in Tianjin, no one would speak because they were still thinking about the Cultural Revolution and the danger of even speaking up in public. What strikes me as being a kind of unspoken secret is affection. I mean, people know each other. They are, there's a kind of affection, which means that if Yoni starts a company and fails, he doesn't feel shamed. He'll go to work for Eyal. And Eyal will say, boy, I really, I'm lucky to have you because you learned so much from having to start that on your own. There aren't a lot of places in the world where this is possible. I'm not sure other countries can learn from it, except to be aware of it. It also has, I must say, a kind of funny implication with respect to these three guys here. When we did our interviews for getting into the Zell program in the spring of 2002, the first question we asked all candidates as they came in, they were all kind of, exceptional students. So the first question we asked to the first 10, was, what was your biggest failure? And the first guy, the gal, I don't remember, looked, what kind of question is that? And then we asked the second, and got the same response. By the time we got to the third, the person came in with a ready answer about their biggest failure, because even though they were all competing with one another, they'd already been talking to each other and saying, oh yeah, he's going to ask, what was your biggest failure? And instead of being taken aback by this, they were all like prepared with an answer for proudly saying what they failed at. And I think this is, I can't quite put my finger on it, but I see the three of you up here, and I kind of feel it in the energy. There's this thing, this affection, which makes no social penalty for failure. And I don't know how you reproduce that, but I think it's really a kind of secret sauce.
We should wrap this up, but I did have one more question then, and that is picking up on Bernie's point. So, has anyone either formally or informally studied the people who wind up as young entrepreneurs, and can you make any sociological observations? I'm guessing there aren't a lot of Haredim in the entrepreneurial ranks. Are there many Sephardim? Are there Ashkenazi?
So I actually find it's a fascinating subject that you just raised, because I'm on the board of United Hatzalah, which is a first responder organization, and they're probably one of the most innovative organizations I've ever met, and they're composed primarily, I would say more than 85%, of Haredim. Haredim is ultra-Orthodox people. The ultra-Orthodox people, though most of them don't have a lot of formal education, they are extremely smart people, very witty, very sharp. What's that?
They have formal education. It's a different kind of formal education.
Okay. Point taken. And they, a lot of them are entrepreneurs, and they study the Gemara. They study. So there are two minorities in Israel, okay, in terms of the Israeli workforce: the ultra-Orthodox and the Israeli Arabs. So there are two different types of people. I will talk more about the Haredim because I know them more, and they, generally speaking, they are more entrepreneurial. So you see that in the past 3 years, they are becoming active members of the Israeli entrepreneurial society. They need different types of places to work and different conditions that are obvious. But you really feel that within, say, 10 years, they will be...
The new legislation on
No.
reducing subsidies.
Oh, well, yes, reducing subsidies. And also, you know what? Deep down, they all want to aspire to create, innovate, and make money. That's, you know, and it's fine. And you feel it. You feel it as a push within the society. It's very interesting regarding that. Regarding, again, what Bernie said, you're right about the social environment is very unique in that it enables people to be entrepreneurs and to fail and to also help each other, because they realize that it doesn't really come at your own expense. But also, and very much like America, we are peoples of, we're immigrants, and every immigrant is an entrepreneur, if you think about it. And it's something that's been around for years. And people are not scared, you know. I mean, they're worried, but they're not scared.
I mean, this is the age-old, one of the age-old questions in entrepreneur research. Are you born an entrepreneur, or are you made an entrepreneur? And I think we'll be fighting that one for centuries to come, right?
I say the answer is yes.
The answer is yes. Well, it is, you know, so the answer is a little bit of both, perhaps. But I mean, what you're describing is a social context which encourages people to take certain types of behavior as opposed to inherent characteristics. I actually think a more meaningful way about trying to understand entrepreneurs and success and lack of success is understanding under these types of conditions, you know, what types of decisions do you make, going back to you around groupthink, you know, setting up structures so that we can make better decisions. How do we avoid certain biases that we might bring into making decisions so that we are more likely to be successful as to trying to worry about whether or not we're born with it or right. But part of that is the social context in which you are working, the organizational context. I mean, what you were describing, the U.S. equivalent to that is Silicon Valley. They celebrate failure. From an employment perspective, it's not uncommon for people from competing companies to be sharing information at coffee shops in San Francisco and Silicon Valley, whereas in other places that's, you know, you're not supposed to do that. From an employment, you know, there's other institutions that are in place that help support that. You know, non-compete clauses, non-competes are not supported in California, right? So from an employment law perspective, so there's all sorts of things that you can do, I think, both at a national level, but also at an organizational level, that will encourage this kind of acceptance of failure and encouragement of entrepreneurial activities.
From a research perspective, it's interesting, per your question, to see the population of the Arab Israelis. There were recent reforms and subsidies and incentives for corporates in Israel and high-tech companies to employ Arab Israelis engineers, and also the same thing with Haredim. And those reforms are doing well, and you see now tenth of more or dozens of more engineers working in startup nations from Arabic villages up north. But it's actually creating this risk averseness effect. So if you're an Arabic engineer that you graduated at the Technion, you got this position in Google or Intel, and you know that you are on this seat of Arabic engineer position, and the likelihood of you to go and start a startup is actually reduced because you know that this seat is saved for you because of this reform, and if you will fail with your startup, you might not end up getting a job. So we still have a lot of things to improve, and you see the cultural differences between what Bernie referred to as North Tel Aviv and Herzliya and the rest of Israel, which is not so homogenical.
Good. Well, with that, we're going to. I'm sorry. One more question.
We want you.
They asked if there's anything the government does in Israel advantageous tax-wise.
Yeah, the whole panel.
The whole panel.
I believe we're covering that in the last panel.
Hold the question.
Okay.
Now. Okay.